You are listening to the Mom to Mom podcast, hosted by Stephanie Sinclair, founder and owner of How2Mom. This podcast is meant to empower women and bring the community together through storytelling and education. During these episodes, you will hear stories of triumph, heartache, and hope. You will hear time-tested tips and tricks shared by mamas and women. You will hear a variety of birth stories that will resonate with all birthing families, advice from professionals who have dedicated their teachings to pregnancy, birth, and moms. Here, you will find encouragement, support, and community, because we are your community, and we are so happy to have you. Now, on to today's episode. Hello, you guys. Welcome to the next Mom to Mom podcast. You all know that birth stories are definitely my favorite part of this podcast, and I couldn't be more excited to introduce our next beautiful guest. She is a How2Mom client. She is a busy mom of two. She is a wife. She also is an entrepreneur, and I will mention more of that at the end. She's a huge inspiration. I am so glad our lives crossed paths. I was absolutely honored to support her and her husband, Jason, through the birth of both of their daughters. But like I told our guest prior to jumping on here, today is about her and her sharing her story. I might make mention here or there to some memories and some important, beautiful parts that I recall. But I want to introduce you guys to Anna. I am so grateful for every mama that gets on this podcast and feels called to share their birth story. As you all know, our stories are sacred and they are intimate, and it takes so much vulnerability to share our birth stories so that those that come after us maybe have some inspiration, some insight to real life birth stories. And so, welcome, Anna. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, I'm so lucky that we are still so much a part of each other's lives. I got to go and visit with the girls not too long ago, and it just brings me so much joy to see all of these beautiful How2Mom doula babies grow up. Just like my own babies, it's like hard to see them grow so quickly, but it's also such an honor to be able to see their growth. So Anna is going to tell us all about her birth stories today. Like I said, she's an incredible mom. And she put so much thought and effort into preparing for her birth. And I really feel like that's what made a huge difference in her experiences. But I will let you take it away.
All right. Thank you so much. My name is Anna, as Stephanie mentioned. I am a mom of two beautiful girls, and we were honored to have Stephanie be a part of both births, thankfully, and they were both pandemic babies. So, as some of you may know or have experienced, we didn't have a lot of options for support. So we were very, very grateful to have the honor of Stephanie joining us for both of those birth stories and situations. As she said, I'm busy, mom of two. I am an entrepreneur. I just started my own cookie business recently, and I work a full-time job styling clients. So yeah, I wake up very early morning, and I start my day about 3 a.m. And yeah, we just do the thing every single day. So
Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
Yes, and side little note, we did have some of these amazing cookies for my husband's 40th birthday party. Not only were they just honestly probably the focal point of the party, because they were absolutely on brand, but they're delicious. Like they're
Thank you.
so tasty. And I'm not a huge sweet fan, so it's not this overwhelming sweet cookie. Like it is delightful.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm also not like a huge sweet person. I was during both pregnancies.
Yeah.
My husband is the sweet tooth in the family, so he's always been my taste tester. And our oldest is as well. But yeah, they are definitely very delightful to have.
I agree. Okay, so what is kind of, and I know it wasn't exact dates, but what's kind of interesting about both of Anna's daughter's birth stories is her first was somewhat of a Labor Day baby, and her second was a Memorial Day baby.
Very unintentional.
No, and honestly, obviously not a big deal.
Yeah.
Our babies are conceived when our babies are conceived, and we
Yeah.
deliver on the days that they decide to come into this world. It's just so funny because as a doula, when we're scheduling out, we are booked out 6 to 8 months
Yeah.
in advance. And it's always so funny. Like you always have to note vacations or holidays or like think through all of that, right? Because
Yeah.
it doesn't matter that it's Labor Day weekend and people are at the cabin. Like if you're an on-call doula and your client is due around that time frame, and I remember actually, and I'll let you get into this because it's an important part of your daughter's birth story, your first daughter's birth story. But my kids did go out of town, and it was beautiful because I'm kind of just patiently waiting for this little girl to enter this world. And I like purged. I organized my house. I decluttered. I was just like, let me know I'm around. Anyways, that's a whole I know. So let's get started on the birth stories.
Yeah. Do you want me to just jump right in and
Yeah, let's jump right in.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with our first daughter, we got married and then got pregnant quickly soon after our marriage, which was in November of 2019. And then, so our first daughter was born in 2020, the height of the pandemic. We honestly weren't even sure if we were going to get to have Stephanie be a part of our birth.
Yeah, we
So that
did
was
a
a little
virtual
nerve.
meeting when we were
Yeah.
not. Yep, we did a virtual meeting and we did have the preparation conversation of as of right now, we are not welcomed in the hospitals. Thank goodness by the time her daughter was born, those restrictions were lifted. And I was able to be there. Thank goodness.
Yes, no, because we had, you know, envisioned, having a support person or doula, making things as beautiful as possible, which they were. But yeah, so we prepared for that, and I think we had two virtual meetings, and then we finally got to do one in person before she was born. So that was great. But it was a very long entrance to this world. But we're so grateful that you were a part of it, and even just like the supportive presence that you gave us, even though we weren't like in person at the time until we went to the hospital and got checked in. It was so wonderful just to be able to call you and chat and talk through all the things.
Well,
So,
what Anna is referring to, some women experience, and if you are listening, you will remember very well what prodromal labor feels like. So essentially, Anna was entering labor, and she was having contractions, but things were not picking up. Things were not getting more intense. Contractions weren't necessarily getting closer together, but it's kind of this in between where things aren't progressing. It's not time to go to the hospital yet. We're promoting rest and hydration and fuel as doulas, but as birthing mamas, it's really, really hard to rest when you're in prodromal labor because those contractions are still intense enough that you're not really able to sleep through them. But this frustration of like, why aren't things happening? Why aren't things picking up? And there are, of course, things that we can do. And we chatted through that in those days of prodromal labor of things that could help getting baby into an optimal position, preparing Anna's body. Obviously, it being her first baby, it was the first time a baby had navigated. So there's lots of pieces of the puzzle that need to come together in order for our labor to progress. It doesn't necessarily mean that anything is wrong, but it's not a place that women like love to be. It's not enjoyable. And so there were things that we did in those days. But I remember a conversation, and Anna, I'm curious if you will tell our callers if you remember a conversation that we had one morning. I think it was like day 3 of
yeah.
prodromal labor,
Mhm.
and you were at your breaking point. And do you want to
Yeah.
tell our listeners about that conversation that we had?
Yeah. So we had initially, talked with Stephanie, gone through, trying to rest, fuel, do all the things to almost distract my brain from
Mhm.
realizing what's going on, but like also not progressing at the same time. We had actually gone to the hospital, got sent home because I wasn't progressed far enough along. And then came home and it was day three, like you mentioned. And I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't know how I can
I'm
keep
done.
going on. And
Mhm.
you were like, okay, I'm going to give you a few tasks to do so that you can distract yourself and hopefully get some rest. Baby can progress and we can get the show on the road. You had shared, please make sure you make like a nice breakfast, try to enjoy each other's company. And at that point, you're just kind of at your breaking point. So that's the last thing that you want to do is try to rest and relax and be calm.
Mhm.
Um, but it did so much help. We actually spent the morning together. We made a nice breakfast. You had encouraged doing sexual intercourse
Which
to
you're like,
progress along, which
"What?"
I was like, I don't want anyone touching me at this point, like absolutely not.
Well, and we wanted
um,
to naturally increase that oxytocin. And I think there was a point that you had been kind of tracking contractions, really kind of hyper focused on like how do we get this to move forward? How do we get this to progress? And we had tried exercises and techniques and things like that. When you had called me that morning, I feel like that was Sunday morning, but you had called me
yeah,
that morning. For sure, there was an emotional release, which can be it stinks kind of when you're in the hard, but it can play a huge role in progression in labor, kind of having that emotional block release. And I listened to Anna and I told her that her frustrations were valid and that I was holding space for her. And I know that this was really frustrating and not fair and it just sucked, right? Like, let's just be real.
yeah.
I'm so sorry that you're in this and this sucks. But I remember encouraging and saying, I want you to forget as much as you can, which I know that is hard to do, but forget that you're contracting. I don't
Yep.
want you timing contractions. I don't want you focused on the contractions. Of course, if you need to breathe through them, breathe through them. But I want you to go on with your Sunday like you would if it was any other Sunday. Whether you wake up, you make breakfast, you go to church, you go on a date, you go for a walk. Like I was like, I want you just to like forget it. Like
Yeah.
put it in a bag, zip it up and pretend it's not happening.
Yeah.
And just date Jason, be together, and try your best to just forget about what's happening. And yes, suggesting intercourse is definitely something that we will suggest as doulas. And there's actually two reasons. Having an orgasm definitely increases our oxytocin and can actually promote contractions within your uterus because your uterus is a muscle. But the sperm can actually help your cervix soften. Of course, you do not want to do this if your water has released. But that was not the case that Anna was in. And so I had just promoted snuggling, being together, intercourse if possible. Again, you get this like, there's no way. And believe me, I understand. I was 38 weeks pregnant with the twins, and Brian and I were like trying everything to get these
Yeah.
babies to come. It was the most awkward sex
Yeah.
we've ever had. But you know what? We did it.
Yeah.
It was
You get
like,
to the point where you're like, I just have to do everything.
yes, yes,
Like
however
I
we
want
can make it
baby
work.
out. Yeah.
Yeah. It's awkward. It's weird. I have a huge belly, two babies, all the things.
Yeah.
So it was such this amazing, pivotal moment in your birth story because we hung up the phone. You were like, okay, yep, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Hung up the phone. You had breakfast. And then what happened?
And then we were intimate, obviously. And then honestly, probably like maybe 20, 30 minutes had gone by. My water broke. I took a quick shower. I called you. I said, okay, it's happening. I think like everything is moving along. And yeah, we went to the hospital, finally got approved to go in. And I just remember being so frustrated though when we checked in because they kept wanting us to fill out all this paperwork. And my husband's like, can we just get her up there and we'll take the paperwork with us? And because, of course, it was the pandemic, they were trying to follow protocol. And,
Yes.
I respect that. But in the moment
So
when you were in labor,
hard.
you were like, this is the last thing I want to be doing right now.
100%.
And then, yeah, and we got checked. I think I was 5 or 6 centimeters dilated at the time of check-in. And then you showed up and everything was calm and peaceful. I think my favorite part was just the affirmations. Like, I am such a huge affirmations person. Like, that is my love language, till the day I die.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, that was, I think, what we both needed, Jason and I both, because he had never really been in a hospital setting. So that was all new for him. I, on the other hand, have had my fair share of hospital experiences. So it was relatively familiar for me. But yeah, just walking through all the measures and the steps. And I just remember hitting a point too while we were there saying, I can't do this anymore. Like, what are my options?
You're
And I
so
think just
tired.
having you advocate and suggest different options, because you can prepare and plan and think all you want that like things are going to go the way you have written down.
Mm,
But I think the biggest thing I've learned is you have to pivot in the moment. You just have to work through whatever you're going through,
yeah.
and just be flexible. I think that was me as a type A, was very hard for me to do.
Oh, right?
Yeah.
Which is you. You're like, this is not how I ran my life for 20
Yeah.
plus years. Now you're asking me to be like type B. Like, what?
Yeah, just go with the flow. Like, that is not me or my husband whatsoever.
Yeah.
But I remember you suggesting doing, was it the nitrous oxide,
Yep.
right?
Well, and I remember too when I arrived, and again, yes, it was even for doulas to get in, like it was a process and we had to show
Yeah.
certification and ID, like all the things. But um we were just all really excited that that conversation and I think honestly, even though it happened pretty quickly after, I think just releasing that and like letting it go was such a huge shift in her mind. And then her body was able to kind of just do its thing without kind of feeling that pressure. But then when Anna got to the hospital, I also want people to note too that yes, prodromal labor can suck and it doesn't always um, work in your favor, so to speak. But what I wanted Anna to know is like her body was working. Things were happening, right? Just not as quickly as we had envisioned or like what we want to endure. And so for her to get to the hospital and to know that there was some progress that had been made, even through all of that hardship, is encouraging, although obviously you were very exhausted. But I remember walking in, you were standing and kind of leaning into the bed. The nurses were there asking, all the registration questions, even if you register. Um,
Yeah.
and you were like, I don't know if I can do this. I think, and an epidural was always on the table. That was
Yeah.
always potentially a part of the birth plan. And so, and I knew that obviously we had done lots of preparation and conversations around that, when we want to do that, why we want to do that, how we want to do that, things like that. So when Anna looked at me and she said, I'm so tired, which understandably so, she said, I think I want to get the epidural. And I looked at Anna and I said, absolutely. Like, of course, yes, that's always been a part of the plan. However, we just got here. Let's utilize your body has kicked into gear at this point. Let's embrace that. Let's continue to use gravity in our favor and movement. How would you feel about doing some nitrous oxide to get through the next couple of contractions so that we can do some positioning, we can do some exercises, we can continue with movement and gravity? And, you never know. Like, I am one of those doulas. And when I, train other doulas and talk to other doulas, they're like, how do you know what to say in the moment? And I'm like, sometimes I don't. And sometimes I literally follow my gut and I'm like, they're either going to punch me in the face right now or they're going to be happy with my suggestion. And I just kind of lead with that. And it usually always works in my favor. But I was so amazed because Anna looked at me and she could have easily been like, no, like, let's just, I want the epidural. She looked at
Yeah.
me, she's like, okay, yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
And the nurses were like, so you don't want the epidural right now? And we're like, nope. Can you
Yeah.
just picking up the word epidural and just let us do our thing? And so she really embraced that, which I think was a huge benefit because once you got the epidural, which gave you the rest that you deserved
Yeah.
and needed to go through the next phase, but we were able to push things further along and kind of help your body and your baby get to a place that once you got that epidural, it just was going to continue to do its thing
Yeah.
on its own.
Absolutely.
So sorry, a little tangent on my half, but
Oh, good. But yeah, I think you can prepare and, in your mind, you envision like, oh, it's going to be a quick birth. Like I had done chiropractic appointment after appointment. I
Yes.
think I saw Dr. Jesse probably every week up until I gave birth. I had done all of the stretches and the techniques that you had recommended. And so I think, yeah, like you said, I was frustrated at the moment, but we finally got past that like hill of, the difficult piece of it. And then,
You
yeah.
kind of shifted the mind frame. All right, you guys, we're just going to take a brief break so that I can tell you all about one of How2Mom's favorite go-to brands and products. Earth Mama Organics formulates and creates organic and natural herbal pregnancy, postpartum, breastfeeding, and baby care products. We believe that they are one of the best and the safest personal care products on the market for both you and for baby. You can follow the link in our bio, or you can go to how2mom.com/links, follow the Earth Mama Organics link, and enter How2Mom for your promotional code to receive 15% off. All right, now back to today's show.
Yeah. And I'm so grateful that you suggested trying something else because I do think my body is just in general slower to progress.
Yeah.
It's not to say everyone's body does that. Everyone is so different. Every birth is so different. But yeah, I think just having the nitrous oxide, like I realized how capable my body is. And I think that alone was so empowering to keep me going, even though I was exhausted and hadn't really slept in a few days. But yeah, that was
moment of like digging deep and being like, yes, I can.
yeah.
Like,
And I think just like the calming, we had a playlist, even the nurses commented how, peaceful and enjoyable the room was. You had the little tea lights, which was great. We turned on the lights, which I highly recommend. If you don't have that in your birth plan, do it. It really sets the mood for your birth. And then make a playlist or you can type in on Spotify,
Yeah.
birth playlist, and most of them are very calming and peaceful.
We actually, on our How2Mom YouTube channel, which Anna and I were talking about, we have a couple different labor playlists. So that can even be, just a quick couple of clicks. But I absolutely respect and love when people tell me they feel safest to birth in a hospital. You have to be birthing where you feel safest. And if that's a hospital, it's a hospital. However, your hospital room does not have to feel like a hospital room. And that is a big thing that I like to set the tone right when I join clients. Because that helps with that mind shift and your body is able to relax and it doesn't have to be in flight or fight mode. And we really just set the tone.
We did, and it was beautiful, and I'm so grateful. And I just remember you giving me like the cool cloths and supporting Jason and having him do different techniques with me as well. And then eventually it got to the point where I was like, okay, I'm ready for my epidural.
Yeah.
And you all said, okay, we support that. And it was great. I think the best part too was just knowing that like the nurses and the doctors and you were able to communicate so seamlessly and take a lot of that like thinking and the burden of like, okay, what do we do next? And you just talking through like, okay, this is where you're at. This is where baby's at. That's so helpful, especially when you're so exhausted to just kind of like know what is to come next.
And also for a type A personality, because like you were able to grasp it, and sometimes we'll talk about that with clients of instead of enduring this contraction and going, I can't, oh my gosh, this hurts so bad. We shift our mind frame to say that contraction is moving your baby. Your baby is getting closer. Your baby is getting lower. And for a type A person, knowing and being able to grasp some like data or concrete information, I feel like can be super helpful.
Absolutely. And yeah, like you said, type A, we like to know what the plan is ahead of time.
Yes.
And you can only do so much planning when it comes to birth. That baby is going to come when they are ready. And we just kind of have to move through every step of the process. So
yeah, absolutely. So once you got your epidural, tell our listeners kind of what the goal was during that point. So obviously rest, to get some type of rest. Do you feel like you were able to sleep during that time?
Yes, even with nurses and doctors coming in, just checking on me, checking on the fetal monitor for baby. I think that really just allowed my body to kind of like release even more after
Yes.
our first conversation,
Mhm.
um, so that I could prepare for the next like wave of intensity, so to
Yes.
speak.
Yes.
Because you don't realize like it is truly a marathon until you're in it.
So
And you really have to pace yourself. And as much as I was like, I just want this baby here, like I'm
yeah.
ready to meet her, the rest was so important for me. And I'm so grateful that we did go to that next step. And then I remember you and Jason were able to get some rest and go grab something to eat. I remember also you had some snacks for me, even though they're like, don't eat, which so much needed. You need
You
fuel
you've
during
seen my
birth.
reel on feeding
You
my
need you need fuel. Like I don't care what
yes.
anyone tells you.
Yeah.
Um, you need some sustenance to like keep going. Otherwise, your body is just feeling so defeated, and you don't feel like
Like,
you can
"Hey, run
continue.
this marathon on no food."
Yeah, or liquids or anything for that
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah, you could do
Like you're
it.
good, right?
Yeah, it's insane, and the evidence is it's just not evidence-based, so it's not like I'm trying to go against anything, substantial.
No.
Anyways, okay, and so how long would you say you had the epidural prior to the pushing phase?
That's a great question. I was so tired. I honestly
I
don't
know,
remember.
and I feel like I I meant to look at the email before,
Yep.
um, but
Maybe a few hours.
think it was
I
just a
don't
couple
know.
hours because I mean you had progressed so much before the epidural. So it was
Yeah.
like a beautiful couple hour nap.
Yes, and we did the peanut ball to kind of help, everything continue to move down. Um, but yeah, I want to say it was a few hours before we ended up
Yeah.
starting to push, and I knew I was ready. And I know so many people are apprehensive when they have an epidural, like, how am I going to know? Am I going to feel anything? Your body will let you know.
So true.
It's
So
your body will just tell you the next step.
if you feel comfortable sharing, and if not, I can totally share this part from my perspective. But
Yeah.
what did it feel like when you felt like you were ready to push? Like what
Yeah.
sensations did you feel in your body, even with that epidural?
Like a huge bowel movement. Like I just felt this intense pressure, almost, and I know people refer to it as like fetal eject syndrome. Like I
Mhm.
just felt like everything was ready to like move its way down. Baby was ready to join us. And yeah, that's,
Yeah.
I just
You do.
knew. I
You're
was
just
like,
like,
okay, it's happening.
it's all in my butt. Like something's in
Yep.
my butt. And we're like, that's your baby.
Yeah.
But here's the beautiful thing too, and I think I've noticed a huge difference. So when I had Mackenzie 10 years ago, 10 plus years ago, I had an epidural. It was a heavy epidural. I
Yeah.
did not get that feeling.
Okay.
Um, maybe, I mean, I had a surge of energy because I remember being very sure I wanted to like brush my teeth and like sit up and brush my hair. And they're like, really? And I'm like, I don't know. I just have this
I
feeling.
just have this urge to do it.
But I don't necessarily remember feeling that overwhelming sensation in my bottom. I definitely did not feel any urge to push. But I do want to say to our listeners that is very different than what we're seeing today. I think the epidurals in themselves are different. I think the anesthesiologists are different. Um, and so it's more so of this like walking epidural that we hear of. These epidurals, they do not numb your vagina. Like
No.
it is your belly, it is the contractions that you're getting relief from. Once that baby is low in your pelvis and you are at the stage where your body is ready to push, I need, I need to prepare clients for that because some are like, I want an epidural, I don't want to feel anything. And I'm like,
But
that's
you
not
do.
really a thing. And so, yeah, so, but it's a beautiful thing because it actually helps us push our babies out more effectively when we can
Yeah.
feel that sensation. And so tell our listeners, how long did you push for? Do you recall?
I think they said it was just shy of 2 hours. And I think it's because like you're, you're navigating all of this newness and
Yes.
you're like, am I pushing in the right spot? Am I not pushing in the right spot? Not that I couldn't feel, I could certainly feel everything still.
But still
Um,
new.
yeah, it's still
Yeah.
new. And I think also I wanted to note on the epidural side of things too, I was still able to move positions. And I just want everyone
Yes.
who's listening to like understand that you can still move positions. You're not stuck on your back, you're not stuck in bed.
Yeah.
We tried all the things. So yeah, I want to say it was just shy of 2 hours, and I think it was just a learning curve. Like you have to like learn exactly where your body is ready to push and where you need to push. And yeah.
Which just under 2 hours is very common,
Yeah.
for a first-time mom. That is not abnormal. That's actually a beautiful place to be, and what can be a benefit too when we are in that pushing phase for a good amount of time is lots of natural stretching of those tissues, right? So, a lot of times, moms that it's their first time and they're curious, like, am I pushing right? I don't feel like anything's happening. We are there to
Mhm.
reassure them they are doing a beautiful job, that that baby's head is naturally stretching those tissues.
Yeah.
And sometimes it just can feel like we're not making progress because that baby is trying to navigate and get underneath the pubic bone.
Yeah.
And that can take time. And then what's kind of interesting to tell clients, that can feel like a long time. And then once that baby comes underneath that pubic bone, things go pretty
Pretty
quickly
quick.
from that point forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You're
It's
like,
yeah,
oh,
like
okay.
you said, they're navigating everything new, you're navigating everything new. And if your body is ever birthed, it's gonna take some time. So
Absolutely. So Anna just did such a great job. You guys, she was so incredibly patient. And like she said at the beginning, it could have gone very differently if she had not had that strength, and that patience to let her body put all of those puzzle pieces together.
mhm,
This could have looked very differently. This could have looked like, a Pitocin driven birth where it's like, okay, it's not doing it on its own. And then the medical staff's like, well, we can give you Pitocin and we can hurry things along. But then
yeah,
that can also lead to different things. Her daughter was
absolutely.
trying to navigate and trying to put all those pieces together to make her entrance into this world. And I feel like that second half went the way that it went because of the steps that we took,
Yeah.
when things were hard and when things were long. Would you agree with that, Anna?
Absolutely. And I think, like I said, and Jason and I both agree to this day, like if you would not have been there, our story probably would have been much different. And I think there would have been a lot of medical intervention that wasn't necessary. And I think just trusting that your body will do its thing um, is the biggest lesson I've learned.
Yeah, I know. It's so hard
So
to let
hard in the
go and
moment.
surrender. But your intuition as a mom is so strong, and just being surrounded by people who aren't questioning you,
Yeah.
they're not questioning your body, which then leads us to doubt. Yeah, you were so incredibly strong, and we were so excited to welcome that little girl. Is she officially a Labor Day baby, or was she right before?
No, she was born on Labor Day.
Ah,
So it was actually wonderful. Her birth and our younger daughter, they were both like right on the holiday,
yeah.
which now in the future is wonderful for like birthday parties and just like having
Yes.
a longer weekend with them, which we love.
And
So
the fact that they
like,
both have that, but separate or different holidays.
yeah,
So then let's talk about I think people kind of understand why you decided to hire a doula for your first and how that was super helpful. Now, can you let our listeners know? Because sometimes it's like, oh, I've done this before. We had support with our first. I think I can go, and have the second baby without a birth doula. Can you kind of talk about why did you decide to have a doula again, for your second birth?
absolutely. I think, like I said before, it's every situation and every birth situation is so different that we both agreed that, again, it was a pandemic baby, such as the baby was. Um, we didn't know what that was going to look like either, if you were going to be allowed to join us again. But just having the extra support and that reassurance, and because things can go so different with each, birth and pregnancy, you
Mm.
just, for me personally and for Jason, like we just wanted that reassurance of like having that person to one navigate if we were too tired to make a decision or to suggest the next steps. And just they know your body, they know the things that you need to hear in the moment. And yes, I think some people are like, "Oh, I've done this once. I'm fine. I don't need another, round of a birth doula." But I highly disagree with that. I think it's just so beneficial for everybody to have that person to be like, "Okay, this is what we're going to do next," or, "Jason, go take a break or go get something to eat." Like just the walking through each piece of it again, because it can be night and day.
Absolutely. And so just so our listeners know, we did the same work that we did with preparing for her first. We still met during
Yep.
her pregnancy. We still worked on body mechanics and exercises. This was a different baby. We wanted to make sure that this baby had optimal room to get into that optimal birthing
Yeah.
position. We created a birth plan. What I really loved when we sat down to prepare for your second birth, well, first of all, you did switch providers and
Yeah.
where you birthed. I don't know if you want to mention kind of the why behind that. I think it's really beautiful because we can always do things differently if we feel in our gut that we need to. Um, but also, I remember sitting down with Anna when we were putting together this birth plan, and I was like, "So let me know." Like, and I always say this to repeat clients. I want you to tell me what things you want to look the same and what things you want to look different. And there's no offense taken, right? Like, I don't
Absolutely.
want people to feel like, "Oh, but you were with us with our first. I don't want to say that anything was bad or wasn't what I like." It's like, no, that is not. I am here to serve you, and we can do things differently in what area, because now all of a sudden it's like you've had that experience. What do you want now out of the next experience? And I remember looking back, so many people have this misconception that if you are going to hire a birth doula, you are going to have an unmedicated birth. Like,
No.
it is such a common misconception. And Anna sat down with me and she was like, "I know I want an epidural for this birth." And I was
Yeah.
like, "I freaking love that." I
Yeah.
was so I was so proud of you to just be like, I know that this is what I want. I know that I'm going to enjoy the birth more if I'm able to be present and fully there. And I just want people to know that first of all, you get to decide. There is no
Absolutely.
wrong way to birth a baby.
No.
Um, and the fact that you knew what you wanted it to look and feel like, oh my gosh, people, stay true to what it is that you want. Do not have this, you know, peer pressure of like, yes, but this person went unmedicated.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. This is your birth.
Doesn't matter. Everyone's pain tolerance is so different too. And or like you mentioned, I wanted an epidural the second round, like for sure from the get-go. First round, I was kind of like, oh, we could go like either way.
Mhm.
But I just knew I would be able to be a lot more present, like you mentioned, and more relaxed. And I would have to say, like, I don't know, we were like cracking jokes and like we were just having a really great time. Not that we weren't with the first birth, but they were just two
Right.
very different stories.
Yeah.
And like you had mentioned, I did switch providers because I didn't have the best postpartum experience with the place that I chose to deliver our first daughter.
Yeah.
So I made the decision that I wanted to meet with the midwives and go that direction for our second birth. And I have to say, I was so grateful that I made that decision, even though I think I was already, oh my gosh, I was probably 20 weeks pregnant, maybe.
Yep.
We're
Yep.
already halfway, and everyone's like, "What are you doing? Why would you do that?"
Yeah.
I'm here to tell you it's okay to pivot. It's okay
Yes.
to change your mind. It's okay to trust
And
your gut and like know that this is what is meant to be and what's right. And just go with that. Like trust yourself.
absolutely. I love that. If there's any takeaway, I think that is a huge one from today's podcast. Your intuition is so strong. You got to listen, you got to follow
Absolutely.
it. Hey guys, it's Stephanie Sinclair, founder and owner of How2Mom. I'm just interrupting today's episode to make sure you are well aware of all that How2Mom offers. We, of course, are a community and a support group for all moms at all stages of life, but we also offer a large variety of services that I wanted to make sure you are well aware of. We offer birth doula services, both in person or online support. We have birth support groups with different birth packages to choose from. We also provide placenta encapsulation services, lactation services from our lactation counselors. We also offer postpartum services, birth planning assistance, belly casting. We have a registered dietitian, nutritionist. We also offer a variety of photography services from birth, newborn, and family packages. We truly have it all here at How2Mom. So please don't hesitate to reach out today to have a free consult and help us find the best way to support you in your pregnancy, birth, and postpartum journey. Now back to today's episode. So let's tell our listeners, how was entering spontaneous labor different with your second than with your first?
I would say just in general, like I obviously knew a little bit more of like what that pain threshold was, what to anticipate. And then I knew better what my body needed to stretch, to move, to instead of just like sitting there. I think I was like so nervous the first round.
1,000%.
Not that I wasn't doing other, measures to try to
No, but you're almost paralyzed like during that contraction because you're just like, oh my God, can I do this?
Yeah, like you're just like, you tense up. Yeah. And I think this second round with our youngest, we were just like, all right, let's move. Like, let's do some counter pressure. Let's do some side laying. Like, I just knew to kind of like walk around, and I knew a lot better to keep myself busy. And obviously at the time with a toddler, you're already busy no matter what, like, so you don't have a choice.
You're distracted.
Yeah. And like I was already in labor. I had prodromal labor again, but it wasn't as long. But I just remember like talking to my parents, they're like, I think we should come get Dahlia. Like, that's our oldest. And I'm like, no, it's fine. Like, we got time. And they're like, I don't want you to like think that you're so confident that like you wait too long and then you have this baby at home. So they ended up coming and grabbing Dahlia and our dog at the time. So that was really helpful. And then Jason and I, like you had shared the first round, were able to date each other, to like watch a movie. We got something to eat. We were able to just chill and like not stress. Like I just remember the first time I was like, everything has to be cleaned and it has to be put in its place. But like, you realize that they will all happen in time and it's okay. And not everything has to be done. I think we were both just a lot more relaxed because we had done it before, and
Totally.
it was just a lot different.
A lot more relaxed.
Like, yeah.
I love it. And we were in contact. Anna had let me know that things had kind of started and contractions were happening, and that they were going to eat and be together. And then when did you decide that it was time to head to the hospital?
Yeah. I think we had just finished eating and we had a movie on and I paused it and I said, okay, these are getting pretty intense.
It's time.
It's time. And then we had called our hospital that we had selected originally, and they were on deferment, which for those of you who don't know, that means the hospital beds were full for the birthing unit and they were sending patients to other nearby hospitals. Again, still pandemic. So that was a little more to be expected at the time. So I will say I panicked a little because I was like, but I have my doctors there and I have, it's close to home. I don't want to drive any further than we have to, because I was feeling like they were coming in pretty intense at that time. So I remember being in contact with you, and then we called a few different hospitals. You offered to call if we needed. And I was like, okay, we'll just wait a little bit longer. Like, this baby's not coming quite yet. Like, I'll just do a few more like things on the exercise ball, I'll do some more stretching. And Jason's like, are you sure? I was like, we're fine. She's fine. It'll be good. Don't worry about it. And by the time I was like, okay, like we have to leave now. We finally called our original hospital that we had selected, and they were like, bed's open, get here. Like, we'll have your name on it. Like, all is
that's
good.
the thing. Things can change pretty quickly. Mm-hmm.
And I want to say that was probably only about an hour, hour and a half time difference. So, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that helped with just kind of letting go of that worry that we were headed. And I think I was actually at a prenatal meeting that night and got the text that we're headed. And I'm like, all right, I'll come from here.
Yeah. And it was perfect because I think you're on the side of town too. So it just ended up working out great. And we got there. They ended up checking me because I just wanted to know, like, mentally, not that anyone has to get checked. I also just want to put that out there as a disclaimer. Yeah. And when they checked me, my water broke. So it was like
That's
perfect
right.
timing. Yeah. And there was a little meconium. So then they had the NICU on, on call just in case. But everything ended up being fine with her. So yeah, it was just a very different, I don't know. I just felt like the midwives, like that group, were just more like laissez-faire, like just very chill, go with the flow, which I didn't think I needed at that time, but it's exactly what I needed and I needed for my baby. So
Yeah. And again, I feel like I can say this just because I am very type A and I came from, a legal background where everything was like spreadsheets and
yeah,
calendared and becoming a mom. And then on top of that, now obviously a doula, like it was probably the hardest, biggest stretch of my personality. It was super humbling, but it's
yeah,
probably been the best thing for my personality because it really prepped me to like be a little bit more go with the flow as a mom because you don't know what every day is going to look like when you wake up and
no,
your toddler has the wrong sock and everything hits the fan.
it
Um,
does.
but yes, that group is amazing. Obviously, they not only appreciate but encourage doula support and they do what's necessary. But anything outside of that, especially when you have doula support, they kind of take a back seat. Like they're like,
Yes,
when you need us, we're here, whatever support you need. But they kind of just let us do our thing. Yeah, it's a beautiful group.
yeah, I will say it was wonderful because yeah, it was mostly like you, me, and Jason, and then our main nurse.
Yep.
Only because Willow would not cooperate and stay on the monitor.
Yes.
She was a wild child, still is. Very much fits who she was in my belly as a human outside. But yeah, she stayed with us and just kept moving everything. But it was just, I don't know, I felt like all of us just interacted very like well. And it was, again, we did the tea lights, we did music, we all were able to take a little nap because we got the epidural, but we waited again so that we weren't slowing down the progression.
Yep.
Um, and yeah, I think the only thing I was a little nervous about was the meconium, but that all ended up being fine when she came out.
Yep. And for
Um,
those of you who are listening, if you don't know what meconium is, basically your baby has had their first bowel movement in utero. Um, the concern is that they could potentially aspirate the meconium when they come out and have their first cry. And so there's just additional nurses in the room to make sure that your baby doesn't need help with transitioning if they were to aspirate. Mackenzie had the same thing. She did aspirate a little bit. They were able to handle it inside the labor and delivery room and get her right back to my chest. A lot of times, babies do just fine, and they are still able to go right up onto mama's chest. That staff, it's just like a little extra birthday party attendees. But generally speaking, for the most part, they are there. And then if baby is good, they leave. But it's just they're there for protocol and just to ensure that if baby needs help, help is right there. But yeah, she did beautifully. What was the difference in pushing time?
10 minutes, 12 minutes versus 2 hours. And I will say it's because I knew where to push. I knew exactly what my body needed. And they actually told me I had to slow down because I was pushing it too well.
And they
She
wanted
was
her to
coming
stretch.
out too fast because she
Yep.
had her hand by her head. And they didn't want any shoulder issues upon delivery. So I remember them telling me, like, whoa, slow down, like you're doing great. But like,
She was so strong. She was like, let's do this.
I was like, we got this. We got
Yeah.
this baby. She's coming. And everyone's
Yeah.
like, all right, but let's just take a minute for a second.
Yeah.
Which is easier said than done when your body is like, all right, we have to push.
Oh,
So
yeah.
but yeah, she was able to be on my chest after she was born. I think they only took her just to weigh her because we were just curious how big she was.
Yes.
But yeah, both births, both girls were able to be on my chest, close with all the monitoring. I delayed any sort of checks because it wasn't necessary, which was great. So yeah,
Yeah. Such beautiful, beautiful birth stories. And I have to say, um, you were the one doing all of the work, but I will say Jason is such an incredible partner. He was such an active participant. He's a beautiful dad. I say often that like there are specific men that are meant to be boy dads, and he is one of them. Like those girls are going to know what standards to have
Yeah.
in life with a partner. And I just loved like getting to know him and working with him. And he was so open to like any guidance, like what can I be like he just wanted to be involved and like what can I do? And so I feel like him and I just we worked so well together. And I hope, Anna, that when you look back, you just felt like surrounded in love and care. Because I know how much Jason just adores you. And so do I. And so it was just it felt really beautiful from my perspective as well. And I'm glad and hope that that you felt that. I think what we will leave our listeners with is just briefly, not only obviously did Anna hire us for birth doula services, but she also encapsulated her placentas with
Yeah.
both girls. Can you, which I know for some of you listening, you might know exactly what that is. That seems super normal. And like, yeah, why wouldn't you? There may be listeners are like, oh my gosh, that's so weird. And I get it. Like, I remember feeling that way with my first. My girlfriend asked me, like, are you going to encapsulate your placenta? And so did my doula. And I was like, where are my real friends? Like, this is bizarre.
Yeah.
I ended up encapsulating all my placentas, and I'm so glad that I did. And we offer that service as well because we believe in it. But can you let our listeners know why you chose to encapsulate, and do you feel like that made a difference?
Absolutely. For those of you who are maybe on the fence or a little unsure and think it's super weird or like very hippie, I've been told
Yes,
when I
100%.
shared that that was what we were planning on doing.
Yes.
There are so many benefits to encapsulating your placenta because your body has like the biggest hormonal shift after you birth a baby. And when I say a roller coaster, I mean a roller coaster of like, you're so happy, you're so sad, you're like, what's happening the next minute? Having both of my placentas encapsulated really helped just kind of like mellow the situations out.
Yes.
Regardless of everything that happened, like after we had Dolly, unfortunately, I did get an infection in my uterus.
Mhm.
And then, but I will say taking it up until then, like really just helped keep me just very calm, very chill. And it definitely helped second round. I know so many people experience like postpartum depression, anxiety. I will say it was a little more intense the second round. So I'm so grateful that I did do it again. Um, but yeah, just having that extra hormonal boost to kind of like regulate everything is so beneficial for you and baby and your partner. Like,
Yeah. And
I'm so glad that we did it.
it's like a multivitamin, right? Like it's nothing
Yeah,
crazy or
no,
or bizarre looking or tasty.
no, it's not crazy. It literally is just like taking your prenatal vitamin,
Yeah.
so to speak, but it's like a postpartum vitamin, like,
Yeah.
but 10 times better.
Magic. It's
So,
magic. Well, Anna, thank you so much for sharing your birth stories with our listeners today. It takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable and share these intimate, raw moments. But we are big believers here at How2Mom that it will help change somebody else's experience. They are going to remember your story when they're in potentially the same kind of shoes that you were in when you started your labors. And so thank you so much. I adore you. I love you. I am so honored to have been a part of those stories, but to still be in your life. So we will, in the notes below, you guys, because, and we don't do this with everyone because some people are not entrepreneurs that share their birth stories, but I do want you to follow Anna's cookie page. Not only is it just fun to follow along and watch her really cool reels of making these cookies, but we are all about supporting small businesses here at How2Mom. And so we will put below in all of the notes where you can follow her and
yeah.
be a part of her life a little bit.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be able to share our stories with you guys. So
Awesome. Well, thanks again. And we will see you guys on the next episode. All right, you guys, that is it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed. If so, please subscribe to our podcast, comment, share, give us feedback. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen, and we will see you next time.